I remember the first day I moved out of our small Chicago apartment to start the new project in Denver like it was yesterday. I was wearing the same navy blazer I'd bought for the job interview 6 months earlier, my tie slightly crooked, my suitcase too heavy, my heart heavier. Emily had smiled at me through the doorway, her hair tied back in that careless bun she always wore when she thought no one was paying attention. I told myself I wasn't going to cry, that I was just leaving for a while, that this was all part of building a future we'd both benefit from. But the second I got in the car and drove past the streetlight we'd argued under that one rainy Thursday, I realized my chest was full of some strange combination of excitement, guilt, and fear. I was moving for my career, the thing I'd told myself I'd put above all else, and Emily was supposed to be my anchor while I figured out how to succeed. The first few weeks in Denver were a blur of meetings, hotel rooms, and takeout dinners alone. I told myself I'd be okay. My job was intense, yes, but I was handling it. And Emily, she called every night, or so I thought she did. I remember one Thursday in particular when I got out of a late client call and my phone lit up with her name. I felt a little rush of relief, imagining her curled up on our couch, maybe holding a glass of wine, maybe just telling me about her day. But when I answered, it wasn't Emily. Not really. It was someone with a voice too familiar, too practiced, who laughed at my jokes the way she sometimes did, but not quite. It caught me off guard, and I blamed it on my exhaustion, told myself I was imagining it. I should have listened to the gut feeling, but I didn't. I pushed it aside and told myself I was just stressed. Denver nights were lonelier than I'd expected. I'd sit in the hotel room, a single lamp casting shadows against the beige walls, staring at the framed photo of us on the shelf. It was taken in front of that tiny Italian place we loved, the one that always overcooked the pasta but never our memories. I'd trace her face in the picture, think about the warmth of her hand in mine, and feel this odd mix of pride and guilt. I was proud that I'd landed this role, that I was doing what I said I wanted to do, but guilty for leaving her behind in a city that was starting to feel too quiet. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, I began noticing things. Texts that came in at weird hours, calls she said she'd return but didn't, little offhand comments that didn't sit right. At first, I dismissed them, told myself I was being paranoid. Long-distance relationships are hard, I thought. We both knew that going in. By the third month, I was exhausted. Work had become relentless, and I barely had the energy to keep up with Emily over video calls. But she insisted we talk every night, and at first it felt like comfort, like a tether to the life I'd left behind. I remember one night, after a particularly brutal day of client meetings, I called her, expecting to hear her familiar sleepy voice, to hear laughter over something trivial, maybe a joke about our neighbor's obnoxious dog. But she sounded distracted. She laughed when I laughed, nodded when I said something serious, but there was a distance. A subtle shift that made me feel like I was staring at her through a window, not actually inside her world. I tried to push it aside, blamed it on time zones, on work, on my own stress. Then came the first direct hit. I remember scrolling through Instagram one evening while waiting for a conference call to start. Emily had posted a photo of her and some guy at a new bar downtown, arms around each other, smiling. I froze. The guy wasn't someone I knew. He wasn't in any of our circles. But Emily looked happy, too happy. Not the kind of happiness she radiated when she was around friends or family. This was different. Something about it was too intimate, too private to be a simple social picture. My stomach twisted, but I told myself maybe it was innocent, maybe they were just friends. I didn't want to admit the thought that crept into my mind, what if it wasn't? A week later, the calls started getting shorter, texts less frequent. I could feel the gap forming, not just physically, but emotionally. Emily would talk about her day in a detached way, laugh at things that weren't funny, and never ask about mine. And the more I tried to reach her, the more I felt like I was chasing someone who had already moved on. My friends in Denver tried to pull me out, tried to remind me that life goes on, even when love gets complicated, but nothing sounded real. I would lie awake in the dark, staring at the ceiling, imagining her at the bar with that guy, imagining the things they might be saying, laughing at. I hated myself for it, for letting my imagination run wild, but I couldn't stop. The distance had become this terrifying lens that warped everything I thought I knew about our marriage. Then came the call that broke me. I had just finished a late meeting with a client who refused to stop questioning every single point I made. I was stressed, angry, exhausted, and all I wanted was to hear Emily's voice, to hear some genuine warmth. I called her, and after a few rings, she picked up. But it wasn't Emily alone. I could hear laughter, music in the background, a man's voice, low and familiar. I froze. My hand was shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone. "Hey, who's that?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, and she laughed, nervously, awkwardly, and said, "Oh, it's just a friend, don't worry about it." But I knew in that moment. The world didn't crack open around me, but something inside me did. A sharp, painful split between the life I thought I had and the life she was living without me. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in the bed, listening to the silence, imagining every possible scenario, trying to convince myself that maybe I was wrong. But the more I thought, the less plausible it seemed. I started checking every little thing, texts, social media, even things I didn't want to see, and each time my heart sank a little deeper. I hated myself for snooping, for not trusting, for letting my paranoia get the best of me. But part of me also felt like I needed to see it, to confront reality before it crushed me completely. It was a Wednesday morning when I finally decided I had to go home. I booked a flight without telling her, without planning anything, just a desperate need to see her, to see if what I feared was true. I imagined walking into our apartment, seeing her in the kitchen, smelling the coffee, pretending everything was normal, and then asking the question that had been burning inside me. "Who are you with?" I imagined her looking me in the eyes, seeing the truth I already suspected, and then watching her face crumble, watching the mask slip. I tried to convince myself I was doing it for love, but deep down I knew I was doing it for answers, for closure, for some way to reclaim a life that was slipping through my fingers. I landed in Chicago late Thursday night. The streets were quiet, the city lights reflected in puddles from an earlier rain. I drove the familiar route to our apartment, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles were white. Every red light felt like a warning, every honk like a drumbeat of impending doom.
I parked in front of our building and just sat there for a long minute, staring at the door, trying to steady my breath, trying to prepare myself for whatever awaited inside. And then I stepped out, suitcase in hand, heart hammering, and walked up the steps. The door was slightly ajar. I remember noticing it before I even rang the bell. That alone should have warned me, should have been the first sign of betrayal. But I was too desperate, too naive, too hopeful. I stepped inside, and the apartment smelled different. Not bad, not clean, just off. I dropped my suitcase by the door, called her name softly, and there was no response. I walked into the living room, my eyes scanning every corner, every shadow, hoping, fearing. And that's when I saw him. Not just in my imagination, not just in my fears, but there, in my living room. He was leaning back on our couch, a beer in his hand, laughing at something on his phone. And Emily, she was sitting next to him, shoulder to shoulder, smiling. That smile, the one that used to be mine, wasn't mine anymore. It belonged to him. I froze. My mind went blank, and then raced. I wanted to scream, to run, to break something, anything, but I couldn't. I just stood there, shaking, trying to process the impossible. And then she looked at me, and for a brief second, I saw guilt flash across her face, a tiny flicker, before it was replaced by something else, something resigned, calm, almost defiant. And in that moment, I realized that nothing I had imagined had prepared me for the reality. Everything I had feared, everything I had suspected, was true. She had built a life with him in my absence. My absence. I don't even remember how long I stood there. Maybe seconds, maybe minutes. My throat was tight, my hands numb, my vision blurred. And then I heard her say the words that would haunt me for weeks. "I didn't want you to find out like this." Those words, they weren't an apology, they weren't remorse. They were just words. And in that moment, I felt something inside me break, something permanent. The apartment that had once been a home, full of memories and laughter, now felt like a trap, a museum of betrayal. I left that night, didn't argue, didn't cry, didn't beg. I just walked out, suitcase in hand, and let the city swallow me up. And as I walked, I realized that the life I thought I had, the marriage I thought I understood, had vanished in a way I could neither prevent nor reverse.
I was left with questions, with anger, with this gnawing, twisting pain that I couldn't name. And the hardest part, the part that I still can't shake, is that she was smiling when I left. She was happy, and for the first time in weeks, I felt completely, utterly alone. I spent the first week after that night in a haze. I crashed at a friend's apartment on the north side, barely spoke, barely ate, and slept in clothes I hadn't changed. Chicago felt different, like I'd been looking at it through a fog, and now it had cleared just enough to show me how alien everything had become. Every street, every coffee shop, every corner of our old neighborhood reminded me of Emily, of the life I thought I had, and of the betrayal I'd walked into. I knew I couldn't stay in that apartment anymore. It wasn't just her. It was the memories, the smell of her shampoo lingering in the bathroom, the faint scent of candles she loved lighting on weekends, the way the couch still bore the imprint of her weight. It was all too much. I couldn't breathe there. The first conversation I forced myself to have with her after that night was over text. I wasn't sure if I wanted answers, or just to feel something. Anger, hate, grief. I sent a single message. We need to talk. It took her 6 hours to reply. I stared at my phone the entire time, heart hammering with every passing minute. When her reply finally came, it wasn't remorseful. It wasn't panic. It was, I know. When do you want to meet? The cold, detached tone made something snap inside me. I wanted to call her, yell at her, throw something at the wall, but I didn't. I made myself wait. I picked a neutral spot downtown, a small cafe halfway between her apartment and her new place, a place we'd never been together. I arrived early, nervously sipping coffee, watching people pass by, imagining the confrontation I was about to have. And then she walked in. She looked different. Her hair was longer, straighter, and there was this confidence in her step, this air that hadn't been there before, the way she carried herself that made me realize she was no longer the person I thought I knew. She smiled at me, but it wasn't the smile that used to knock me off balance. This one was measured, careful, like she was choosing her words before they even came out. We sat across from each other, and for a long time, neither of us spoke. I watched her hands, the way she fiddled with her coffee cup, the way her eyes darted to the window, and it made me angrier than anything else. Finally, I blurted out, "Who is he?" I didn't even realize I was shouting until people around us looked up. She flinched but didn't answer immediately. I could see her trying to decide how much truth to give, how much to withhold. And then she said it, slowly, deliberately, like every word was a dagger. "His name's Josh. He's someone I met a few months ago. Things just happened." I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. My stomach twisted, bile rising, my vision going blurry. I wanted to ask how long, what happened, why she didn't tell me, but the words wouldn't come. All I could do was stare at her, trying to reconcile the woman in front of me with the woman I married, the life I thought we shared with the one she had been building behind my back. "A few months," I groped. My voice sounded foreign, like it belonged to someone else. She nodded, avoiding my gaze. "I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't want to hurt you while you were gone." I laughed, bitter, hollow, a sound that surprised even me. "While I was gone, Emily, you were living a completely different life while I was trying to build one for us. Do you even hear yourself?" My hands were shaking, coffee cup rattling, and she reached for them, trying to calm me, but I pulled away. Every instinct I had screamed to hit, to yell, to break something, but I just froze. I felt like my body wasn't mine, like it was a bystander in some cruel film. She tried to explain, really she did, talking about loneliness, about how we drifted apart, about small things I hadn't noticed that led her to him. But every word sounded like an excuse. I wasn't listening really. All I could think about was the betrayal, the night salon in Denver, the calls that weren't hers, the Instagram photos, the voice I heard on that one call, the life she'd chosen while I was living out of a suitcase. And every time she tried to justify it, I wanted to scream, to shake her, to make her understand the way it felt to be me, powerless, blindsided, abandoned by someone I thought I could trust with everything. I left the cafe that day in a daze. The streets blurred past me, cars honking, people talking, but I couldn't hear any of it. My mind was filled with one question over and over. How could she do this? How could she choose him over me? I wandered aimlessly, My phone buzzing constantly with texts I didn't answer, calls I couldn't bring myself to take.
Every part of me wanted to scream at her, to demand she explain every moment of every day, every lie, every hidden smile, every private text I wasn't supposed to see. But I also wanted nothing more than to disappear, to leave Chicago, to leave everything behind. Over the next few weeks, the reality of what she'd done began to sink in. I tried calling friends, people I trusted, to vent, to break down, but the words caught in my throat. Every time I spoke, all I could manage was silence, broken by occasional choked-out phrases. I spent nights driving through the city alone, windows down, even in the cold January air, just to feel some sense of movement, to feel like I was going somewhere instead of trapped in the static nightmare of my own home. I imagined confronting Josh, imagined shouting at him, imagined threatening him. But I never did. Part of me feared what I might do if I actually saw him. Part of me feared that any action would change nothing, that she had already made her choice, that I was just catching up to a reality I hadn't wanted to face. I tried to talk to Emily again, but it was worse. She had grown distant, careful with her words, like touching me wrong could undo everything she'd built. She said she still loved me, in some way, but her eyes betrayed her. I could see the pull toward him in every glance, every hesitation, every breath she took when she thought I wasn't looking. It was like loving someone who was no longer fully present, like trying to hold water in your hands. I wanted to scream that I deserved honesty, that I deserved respect, that I deserved the woman I thought I married. But instead, I just felt hollow. I started noticing little things around our old apartment too. Her favorite mugs gone, the couch rearranged, photographs taken down or replaced. It was subtle, these changes, but they added up to this terrifying realization. She had erased parts of our life together, as if I hadn't existed. And every time I noticed something, a pang of anger and grief cut through me. I started sleeping in my car sometimes too scared to go back to the apartment, too afraid of seeing some new mark of her life without me. And yet, I couldn't stop checking. Couldn't stop imagining her with him, laughing, kissing, lying next to him where I used to be. One night, I found myself parked near that bar she'd gone to in Denver, or rather, in Chicago, the one she mentioned she liked. I hadn't planned to go inside, but the pull was magnetic. I wanted to see, to confront, to feel something real instead of the sterile, distant updates I got through social media and friends. I stayed in the car for nearly an hour, watching the lights flicker, watching couples come and go, feeling every ounce of betrayal burn into my chest. I thought about the calls I had ignored, the messages I had hesitated to send, the nights I had spent alone, believing in us while she was building something else entirely. It got worse when I heard from mutual friends, the ones who didn't know how much I'd found out. They casually mentioned seeing her with him at dinners, at parties, even at a weekend getaway I hadn't been invited to. Every piece of news felt like a fresh wound. I felt like I was falling through some invisible trapdoor, like the world was moving on without me. And the strangest part? I couldn't hate her entirely. Part of me wanted her back, wanted to fix this, wanted her to cry and beg, wanted to believe that some version of the woman I knew still existed somewhere beneath the new life she'd built. But every day made that version of her more distant, more unreachable, and the anger mixed with longing until I didn't know what I was feeling at all. I started keeping a journal, trying to sort out the chaos inside me. I wrote down every thought, every fear, every detail of what I imagined she was doing, who she was with, what she was feeling. But even writing didn't help. If anything, it made the emptiness worse. The pages filled with rage, heartbreak, and confusion, but at the end of the day, the only thing clear was that I had been left behind, abandoned by someone I thought was my partner, my soulmate, my home. I began to realize that no amount of confrontation, no amount of reasoning, no amount of pleading could change what had already happened. She had moved on. She had chosen a new life without me, and I was just the ghost left behind to watch it unfold. I caught glimpses of her happiness too, and those moments cut the deepest. I saw her at a friend's wedding, laughing with him, dancing, her face lit up in a way I used to see only with me. I tried to tell myself it wasn't real,
that maybe she was putting on a mask, but the truth was unavoidable. Every smile, every shared glance, every casual touch spoke a language I couldn't understand, one that didn't include me. And the worst part was that I couldn't even be angry at him in the way I wanted to be. He hadn't betrayed me. He had simply been there at the right time while I was absent. The betrayal wasn't his. It was hers. And that made it worse. It was intimate, personal, and inescapable. And so I drifted. I moved between friends' apartments, bars, long drives, my old apartment, trying to feel something, anything. I called Emily a few more times, but every conversation ended in silence, in awkward pauses, in words left unspoken. She wanted to maintain some semblance of civility, of respect, but I wanted nothing but answers I knew I would hate. I hated her, yes, but I also hated myself for still caring, for still imagining a way to turn back time, for still hoping that maybe she'd choose me if I made the right argument, if I said the right words, if I forced the truth out of her. But the truth was already there, and it had burned me to the core. I knew then that I couldn't stay in Chicago either. I had to leave, had to get away, had to figure out how to exist without her, without the life I thought we had, without the illusion of a future we were supposed to share. I packed a bag, booked a flight to a city I'd never been to, and just went. No plan, no expectations, just the desperate need to feel something other than betrayal and heartbreak. And in that flight, staring out at the clouds, I realized that my marriage, my life as I knew it, had ended while I was states away. I wasn't just losing Emily, I was losing myself. I landed in Seattle with nothing but a small suitcase, my laptop, and a sense of quiet desperation that I couldn't shake. The city was gray and rainy, but I almost welcomed the gloom. It mirrored what I felt inside. I found a tiny studio apartment in Capitol Hill, somewhere I could vanish, where no one would know my name or my history. I spent the first few days unpacking the essentials and staring out the window at people hurrying by with umbrellas, oblivious to the kind of chaos a single human heart could endure. Every time my phone buzzed with a notification, I'd flinch, half expecting it to be her, half hoping it wouldn't be. The nights were the worst. I'd lie on the narrow bed, ceiling staring back at me, thinking about every call I missed, every message I ignored, every moment in Denver that felt lonely, but now seemed trivial compared to the betrayal I'd walked into. My mind replayed the scene in our apartment over and over, the way he leaned back, the way her shoulder brushed against his, the detached smile she wore when I caught them.
It wasn't just infidelity. It was a life she had quietly built without me while I was doing what I thought was right. Every replay burned sharper than the last, and I'd wake in cold sweats, heart racing, imagining her laughing at something he said, her voice no longer mine. Eventually, I forced myself to distract my mind with work. I found a temporary contract at a marketing firm downtown, the kind of place where deadlines were cruel, but focus was necessary. It didn't heal anything, but it kept me awake enough to feel like I was moving forward, even if it was in tiny increments. I'd leave the apartment early, walk miles to clear my head, grab coffee from the little shops tucked between towering office buildings, and watch strangers' lives unfold. I envied their normalcy. Couples holding hands, friends laughing at something inconsequential, people arguing over parking spots. They all felt real, tangible, not coated in betrayal and pain like mine. Then came the night I saw her by accident. I was meeting a friend from college at a bar downtown, trying to find some semblance of social life, some connection that didn't come with the sharp sting of memory. And there she was, Emily, across the room, laughing, leaning against Josh, the same Josh from Chicago. My stomach twisted. I froze mid-step, half hidden behind the doorframe, watching her, the way her hair fell over her shoulder, the subtle tilt of her head when she laughed at something he said. She looked so alive, so unburdened, and my chest ached. I wanted to run, to disappear, but my feet stayed rooted. I realized then that her happiness was no longer mine to touch, and the idea of reclaiming any part of her, even a conversation, felt impossible. I didn't approach her. I couldn't. I sat with my friend, pretending I was fine, but inside I was unraveling. I kept stealing glances, and every time she looked up, it felt like she could see straight through me, like she knew what I had been thinking, what I had endured, the quiet agony of watching the life I'd built crumble without me. It wasn't fair. Nothing about this felt fair. I knew logically I couldn't interfere with her new life, but emotionally, I wanted to scream at her, demand answers, demand that she feel even a fraction of what I had felt. But she didn't, and she wouldn't. And there it was, the unbearable truth. She had moved on completely, and I was still broken. The following weeks became a strange, cruel routine. I'd wake early, work long hours, and spend nights wandering the streets of Seattle, half-heartedly trying to connect with people who didn't know my history, my pain. Sometimes I'd call old friends from Chicago, those who knew everything, those who had been witnesses to our life together. They tried to comfort me, tried to tell me I deserved better, but their words felt hollow. No one could undo what I had walked into. No one could fix the emptiness left behind by someone I had loved with everything I had, someone who had shattered my trust in ways I couldn't name. One night, after a particularly long day at work, I sat on the tiny balcony of my apartment, rain dripping off the railing, and thought about everything I had lost. The anger, the grief, the betrayal, they all swirled together into a storm I couldn't control. I realized I was stuck in a loop, trapped in this narrative where I was always the wronged, the abandoned, the one left behind. And the worst part of me wanted to forgive her, wanted to convince myself that maybe we could rebuild, that maybe she hadn't meant to hurt me. But every instinct, every memory, every fragment of my heart told me that was impossible. The woman I loved was gone. Then came the message. It was late, nearly midnight, from Emily. I stared at my phone, heart hammering, unsure whether to open it. When I finally did, it was short, almost casual. "Can we meet? I think we need closure." I wanted to throw the phone, scream, tell her to leave me alone, but I didn't. I wanted answers. I needed them, even if I didn't want to admit it. We agreed on a place, a small park near the waterfront, where the city lights reflected on the water, casting long shadows. I spent the day walking in circles, trying to calm the storm inside me, rehearsing what I might say, imagining how she would respond. When I arrived, she was already there. She didn't run to hug me or apologize. She stood a few feet away, hands in pockets, eyes down, and I realized that the woman I had loved wasn't there. The person standing in front of me was someone I barely recognized. We sat on a bench in silence for a long time, watching the water ripple, the ferries crossing back and forth. Finally, she spoke. "I didn't know how to tell you everything before. I'm sorry." I wanted to ask for more, wanted to tear her down, wanted to demand why, but the words caught in my throat. Instead, I just nodded, listening to the sound of her voice, realizing that the apology didn't change anything. She talked about how things happened gradually, how the loneliness got worse, how Josh had been there when I wasn't. Every word made my chest tighten, made my fists clench. I wanted to scream, wanted to shake her, wanted to punch the air and have her understand the devastation she had caused. But I didn't. I just listened, silently taking it all in. And somewhere in the back of my mind, I realized that no amount of talking, no amount of confrontation, no amount of tears would bring back what we had. It was gone. She had made her choice, and I had to live with it. We sat there for hours, the conversation awkward and tense. I wanted to hate her, wanted to throw everything at her, wanted to make her feel the emptiness she had left in me. But as the night wore on, I realized something else. I didn't hate her, not fully. Part of me still loved her, still remembered the warmth, the laughter, the way she could make a room feel like home. But that love was twisted now, corrupted by betrayal, by absence, by the cruel knowledge that she had built a life that didn't include me. It was a love that hurt more than anything else, a love that I couldn't let go of, but that I couldn't act on either. I left the park that night with no answers, no resolution, only a hollow ache that filled every part of me. The city lights blurred, rain-slick streets reflecting everything I had lost, and I realized that the person I had been before, trusting, hopeful, secure, was gone. In their place was someone raw, wounded, and painfully aware of the fragility of love. I didn't know how to move forward, didn't know if I wanted to. I only knew that the world kept moving, that Emily had moved on, that I was left to navigate a life fractured by someone I had trusted completely. And so, I did what I always did when I couldn't handle reality. I kept walking, kept moving, kept trying to distract myself with work, strangers, meaningless conversations, anything to escape the relentless replay of betrayal. But it followed me everywhere, in every reflection, in every laugh I overheard, in every couple holding hands.
It was a shadow I couldn't shake. The betrayal wasn't just a wound. It was a lens through which I now saw everything. Every relationship, every trust, every moment of love. I didn't know if I would ever recover, or if recovery was even possible. All I knew was that I had to survive. Somehow. Even if it meant wandering through life half empty, half broken, half alive.
The months that followed blurred together in a strange, numb haze. Seattle became my refuge, but also my cage. I threw myself into work harder than I ever had, staying late at the office, picking up extra projects, anything to distract myself from the gnawing emptiness that lived in my chest. I met people, made acquaintances, even went on a few dates, but nothing stuck. I wasn't looking for love, I was looking for a distraction, a temporary anesthetic to the pain Emily had left behind. Every time someone smiled at me or tried to get close, I flinched. I could feel the ghost of her lingering in every thought, every memory, every heartbeat. The hardest moments were the quiet ones, nights when the apartment was dark, rain tapping against the window, and all I could hear was the echo of what used to be. I'd think about her first apartment in Chicago, how tiny and cramped it was, but how it had felt like home. I'd think about the nights we spent laughing on the couch, the way she would lean her head against my shoulder, the warmth that had once felt eternal. And then I'd remember the betrayal, the way she had moved on, the way she had smiled at him, the way my life had been quietly dismantled while I was states away, and I would feel hollow, hollow, hollow. I started seeing a therapist a few months after moving. I resisted it at first, feeling like talking to a stranger about my life, my marriage, my heartbreak was admitting weakness, but I couldn't escape the torment on my own. Every session felt like dredging it through mud, each word of Emily's betrayal another weight pulling me under. I told her everything, the apartment, the phone calls, the photos, the way she looked at him, the night I saw them together in Chicago. And she listened. She didn't judge. She didn't tell me to forgive. She just let me unravel. Slowly, painstakingly, I began to understand that what she did wasn't a reflection of my worth. She had chosen her path, and I had no control over it, no matter how much I wanted to. The turning point came one rainy afternoon, nearly a year after I'd first left Chicago. I was walking along the waterfront, the gray clouds blending with the water below, when I realized I wasn't thinking about Emily. Not really. My chest still ached, sure, but I wasn't obsessing over what she was doing or who she was with. I wasn't watching her social media, rereading old texts, imagining scenes that didn't exist. I was just moving. Not fully healed, not fully whole, but moving. It was subtle, quiet, almost imperceptible, but it was real. And for the first time in over a year, I didn't feel like a ghost in my own life. I never went back to Chicago. I didn't need to. I had to let her go completely, even if a part of me would always remember, always ache. I learned to find comfort in my own company, in the city around me, in small victories, finishing a project at work, running into a friend for coffee, finding a new favorite bookstore. And slowly I started to forgive, not her, not fully, but myself, for believing in something that wasn't meant to last, for loving someone who couldn't love me the way I needed. That forgiveness felt heavier, deeper, more necessary than anything else. I heard about Emily from mutual friends now and then, the way you hear about someone who belongs to your past. They said she and Josh were still together, traveling, building their life. I didn't feel anger anymore, not like before. I felt a strange, quiet sadness, a recognition that life had moved on without me, and I had to do the same. I realized that loving her had taught me something brutal but real, that love can be beautiful and destructive, that betrayal can break you, but that the human heart can survive even the deepest wounds. I wasn't the same person I had been, but I was still standing, still breathing, still capable of living again. One evening, I walked into a small art gallery in Pioneer Square. I had no reason to go there, just a whim, a desire to do something outside my routine. And there it was, an abstract painting, chaotic and violent, but with streaks of gold running through it. I stared at it for what felt like forever, and then it hit me. That painting was me, broken, fractured, marred by betrayal and pain, but still finding light, still finding color, still capable of being seen. I realized then that my life didn't need to mirror what I had lost. I didn't need Emily to complete me.
I could build a life that was entirely my own, shaped by my choices, my passions, my resilience. The process wasn't immediate, and it wasn't easy. There were nights I cried myself to sleep, nights I screamed into pillows, nights I felt the weight of absence so acutely it made me dizzy. But I learned to survive those nights, to let the pain exist without letting it define me. I began reconnecting with friends in Seattle, taking long hikes in the Cascades, trying new restaurants, writing more than I ever had. I began to feel like the person I was before Emily's betrayal, only stronger, wiser, and more cautious. It didn't erase the past. The memory of seeing her with him, the betrayal, the heartbreak, it all remained. But the raw, all-consuming agony slowly dulled. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need answers. I needed life, and I found it in the smallest moments. Morning coffee, the rain on my face, laughter with strangers, a quiet apartment that belonged entirely to me. The emptiness receded just enough for me to breathe again, just enough to realize that I could be whole without her. One evening, nearly 2 years after it all began, I sat on my balcony, a warm cup of tea in my hands, watching the city lights twinkle in the distance. It was quiet. The rain had stopped, and I realized I wasn't consumed by anger, grief, or betrayal anymore. I was simply present. My chest wasn't heavy. My mind wasn't racing with what-ifs or imagined scenes. Emily existed in the past, a chapter I had survived, and the life I had now was my own. I was finally free of the ghost of her, free of the shadow of betrayal, free to live without the weight of someone else's choices. I thought about her one last time that night, not with bitterness, not with longing, but with a strange, quiet acceptance. She had been a part of my life, had been my anchor, my love, my world, and she had left. But leaving didn't break me. Losing her didn't destroy me. It reshaped me, forced me to confront my pain, and ultimately taught me that the only life I could fully claim was my own. And for the first time in a long time, I smiled. Not at her, not at what we had, but at myself, at the life I was building, at the resilience I had found. Betrayal had scarred me, yes, but it hadn't killed me. I was still here. I was still breathing. I was still capable of loving, of laughing, of living fully again. And that, I realized, was enough. The storm had passed, the pain had softened, and though the memories would never fully fade, the life I had lost had been replaced by one I was finally ready to embrace. The heartache remained a faint echo, a reminder of what I had endured, but it no longer defined me. I had survived, I had grown, and I had finally reclaimed myself.